cope with death, but there's also some hidden meanings that these kids can take away from it. It is a Disney movie in the sense that it does teach many lessons in the hour and 30 minutes that this movie airs. So.
Right, absolutely. It has moral consequences to the lessons being taught, which is how a Disney movie typically writes their movies. So we see that, which is great, and I love it. And it's commonplace for one or both dogs in a dog movie to be a street dog. Not the best of dogs at first, like even in Lady and the Tramp, Tramp is a street dog who steals for food, and he makes some friends along the way or whatever. But he's for better or for worse, he's a street dog, and he learns to be less of a street dog. Not quite the same because he wasn't really a gangster like in this one, but that seems to be a common theme they use with dog movies. Or cat movies.
Well, it's fighting for survival. Right. It's fighting for survival. That's what it is. It's survival of the fittest, I believe.
And doing it on your own and then having to learn to do it as a team. So we have that. What do you think of their depiction of heaven in the movie? Fluffy clouds and dancing.
As like everybody else in life, I've had my deals of suffering with relatives passing. And I was always told that because it was probably passed down like everything else is, and when it comes to families, that there is not a care in the world when you're up there. It's, for lack of a better term, sunshine and rainbows. But this really took me back to my childhood to listen to what was always been told to me was there is not really a care in the world. There's so much to look around and be smiling about that you have no worries. And their depiction really actually hit home for me. It was very Fantasia-like in a sense, with all the detail and some detail, some abstract. But yeah, the depiction actually fit to me like I was being told as a kid. So I totally went with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've seen in pop culture where angels are like laying on clouds and whatnot. Now we see like the clouds, like when we were kids, you'd see pictures of like angels laying on clouds and stuff like that. Now, an interesting take on this is we do see hell. We see that Charlie has a dream. Now, it may be a dream or he may be being pulled down there. And when it doesn't succeed, he's back in his body because as Catholics, right, you learn that the soul goes to heaven. The body stays here, but the soul goes to heaven or hell. And in this case, maybe he's being pulled to hell, but he survives that, right? And he comes back and one of the other dogs is like, you were having a bad dream. And maybe he survived that simply because he had just taken the pizza to them. So he had done a good deed. So hell really couldn't claim him at the moment. But my father had a very interesting take on all of this in that we weren't the most religious people. We didn't go to church all the time. He went a lot when he was a kid, but as a family, we didn't go to church all the time. We did believe, in much of the teachings of the Catholic Church, but we didn't actively practice it all the time. And his take was, and maybe he was only telling me because I was a kid, because he passed when I was 14, so who knows, but that there was no hell, that hell didn't exist, that there was only heaven, that you could only go one way. And some part of that, in my opinion, has to be true because, at least in the Catholic religion, right? I can only speak for the religion that I know. You can get last rites and you're absolved of everything you did as long as you're sorry at the end. So who's not going to be sorry at the end? I guess there's people that aren't, we can get into that. But for the most part, any little thing that I've done or you've done is going to be forgiven at the end, right? So maybe Carface fits into the category of like a serial killer or something that may not be sorry at the end. But for the most part, I'm sure I called someone a jerk and technically that's not okay. But if I'm dying, I'm obviously sorry for that. That's a meaningless thing to have done at that moment, right? And so I would go to heaven anyway. But more importantly, my dad explained further in that if you truly are a bad person, then you don't believe in anything above you. And if you don't believe in anything above you, and it is correct that heaven exists, and it is correct that the God I believe in is the right God, is the true God, right? If all of this is true, which I'm not telling the listener whether it is or not, everyone has their own beliefs, and I respect every one of them because none of us know. But if all of that is true, getting stuck in heaven when you have lived your whole life as you don't believe in it or you hate it would be hell to you. Because someone who's a decent person would want to be there. Someone who's a horrible person would not want to admit the fact that Jesus exists and would not want to be in heaven. So that is their hell. So there's really not two places. It's really you, and your soul decides which one of those this place is.
Very well thought out. Very well spoken. I, too, myself, am Catholic. I am not what one priest would call a C&E kid. I haven't been to Christmas or Easter Mass in about 30 plus years.
Yeah, same here.
But also there is, you talk about last rites, there's also the confession that you do, that we used to do every Sunday when we would go in, absolve ourselves, 9 Hail Marys, 14 Our Fathers, out the door we go. So so we're a clean slate. And even though we have last rites, we're still a clean slate. But that's very, very well thought out. And I truly believe that you are correct. Because it is hell for the person who doesn't believe.
Right. And look, and it's not saying that if I'm wrong and I go to a different version of heaven with some other God, that wouldn't be hell to me because I was still a good person. Now I found out the truth, which God is correct. But that God was looking for good people, right? So I'm okay. And I'm sure there are people who would not be okay with what I'm saying now, but I would be okay no matter which one we find out, because if you put the books all together, if you look into all the religions, they're all really just asking you to be good people in the end. So does the name of who the true God is really matter to me personally? No, it doesn't. What matters to me is that we're all being good people and trying to help one another and move forward in the right direction. So I believe that any God would accept the fact that, all right, he didn't believe in the right God, but he did the right thing his whole life. He didn't believe in me, but, he did follow a moral standard. So I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
I would think. I don't know. Maybe not.
No, I would be if, to follow a moral standard, to ensure humanity is kind, to ensure, humanity is right, for you to make sure you do the best job you can to being the best human you can, to being the true human really it's the best thing to do. And it's the only thing to do. It shouldn't matter, like you said, it shouldn't matter who you believe. The true thing is that to be the best human there is.
Right. And that's how I feel about it. And, we're way off topic here because this doesn't get into what religion is correct or not. We're just veering off here because it is a topic of heaven, but
it is a topic of heaven, but it's also, it as much as we're veering off topic, it still comes down to Charlie in a sense of what is right to be the best person to be. And right, that's absolutely. His exploration.
Yes.
And it's his exploration to that. So as much as we're veering off the main freeway, we're still along the shoulder of the
we're on the service road.
We're on the service road. That's it. We got pulled over by a cop. Big deal.
Won't be my first or last.
Exactly, right?
So
as long as we pay the ticket and we admit to our fault, we'll be a good human being. And that's basically it.
Exactly. And so now moving this forward, Charlie is now under the impression he can never go to heaven, right? Because he stole his watch. He's been wearing the watch, and he even gets shot at with a ray gun, and he doesn't die because he can't die because he's holding the watch itself. And they eventually kidnap the girl and set the place ablaze, and Charlie goes back to get her. The most interesting part of this scene, we see an alligator scene. We see a couple other things happen involved here, but he's fighting Carface, and he throws Carface into the water, but she's in the water. So Charlie dives in because she's drowning, grabs her, and the watch comes off. He tries to grab the watch, but he loses her. So he has to grab her again, and he gives up the watch. The watch now falls, and he puts her on a plank and shoves her out. So he doesn't get her all the way back, but he gets her to safety. He pushes her out of the building. She's floating towards help, right? And I think this is important here because as he goes back for the watch, we see the watch fill up with water and we see the time stop. Now he died again, right? This is the end of his life for a second time. More importantly, I think that gets missed a lot when people watch this movie is when after he passes, right, after the clock stops and he dies a second time, we see outside, we see them looking for Charlie. And she comes floating up, and it's not Charlie pushing. It's the second in command for Carface. It's his enemies, number 2, who realizes that what they're doing is wrong. And I think the important part of this message is you can't do it alone. You can't be a one-off. You have to have help. And sometimes that help comes from the least likely of places in a person, or dog in this case, that was your enemy and rival just minutes earlier.
I am in total agreement. I will add one, and I will say I think this is Charlie's moment of truth to the ultimate of humanity is sacrifice, to which he could have gone for the watch, but he saw Anne-Marie in despair, whom he had taken on in a familial sense to say, screw the watch, I'm going for my family. That's how I took it.
Right.
As something of a sacrifice.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Her well-being is more important than my own. It's
That's
self-sacrifice at the highest of levels. And just before this, she did go to the family and she got real waffles with real syrup. And the family was asking her where her parents were. And she said she didn't have them. And she lived in the junkyard with Charlie. And so she's now getting her family, right? This is the building of her family. And Charlie basically tells her that I can't stay with you. This isn't my kind of life or whatever. And, but he's happy for her, and then he has to save her because he knows she has to live, she has to go on, and it would hurt the family to have found a daughter and now lose her because that's how they're starting to think of her. And we see after the fact, after he saves her and he passes, the light of heaven opens up over him, right? And tells him, you can come back now. You made the ultimate sacrifice. You sacrificed yourself for her. Your good deed was enough to wipe out you stealing the watch. And that scene is really sad because now they have a home. They're in a bed. They're not in a junkyard, right? So now that everything's fine, he can go. But I think that speaks to a bigger issue. Issue's probably the wrong word. That, and this is where I tie it to my dog. Jules lasted long enough for my kids to get to school before passing away. And he was in pain that last morning. And he wasn't himself. Like up until that night, he was fine. I mean, he was old. He couldn't jump as high anymore, and I had to help him up onto things and stuff. But he wasn't deathly in pain or sick. And I feel, and whatever, that he lasted long enough for the morning so that my children could say goodbye, which is what happens in this movie. They let him wake up Anne-Marie Squeaker one last time to say goodbye, to say, I got to go on a trip, but you'll be all right because you're with a good home and a good family. And you even have it here. Goodbyes aren't forever. And goodbyes aren't forever because when it's your turn, when it's your time, when your clock runs out, you'll be reunited again with your loved ones. And this dog is Anne-Marie's loved one now.
Yeah. Goodbyes aren't forever. I'm not a pet owner. I know friends that are, yourself included. I have other friends as well. I can only relate this to loss of loved ones, grandmothers, friends, things like that. To say goodbyes aren't forever because you always have that. For me, there's always something that goes on, whether it's in your head or you feel a chill or something, to know that somebody's there. That somebody's there watching you. That somebody's there saying, hey, what's up? It's been a long time. That's what goodbyes aren't forever is for me personally. And I'm getting emotional thinking about it because you know, a little too often you think about those people